In this video, we're going to cover how to put together a first pass pitch deck so you're prepared to present your concept or project to a team, a client, or even just yourself. So, let's get started. Pitch decks are, at least for me, different from an actual portfolio presentation or portfolio deck. They're a way for you to get people on board with your project before you've even started to draw, while a portfolio deck is a literal presentation of all the work you've put into a project. With a pitch deck, you're primarily using references you've gathered for your ref board with short statements to clarify your intent. It's essentially like an elevator pitch with pictures. Knowing how to put together an efficient pitch deck has been a really useful skill for me as a professional, because some clients will ask you to pitch to them your concept based on their requirements, and they need a baseline understanding of your direction before they're going to greenlight your ideas. Especially if you're going to share your research with other non-creatives, having a concise and easily digestible way to get them on board with your concept is really important. Not everyone is going to be willing to jump hoops or suspend disbelief for you, and at times, what you give them is literally what they take away. It doesn't matter if you have a grand vision that just needs a little explanation, you need to operate like you will have no chance to defend your work, which actually often tends to be the case. As an example, I had a client once who literally could not envision a fantasy story that didn't look like medieval Europe. For some reason, despite plenty of resources out there that didn't use medieval Europe as their cultural source, it just didn't seem to click in their head that this was a possibility for their project until I showed them a pitch deck that used Central Asia as an example of a primary cultural source. It wasn't until they actually saw it that they were willing to explore different avenues towards the visual design of their project. I've also lost clients before because my pitch decks would miscommunicate my intention or create misunderstandings with a client's perception of my idea versus my actual concept. So being sure that your pitch deck is as clear as possible is going to help you so much. We'd like to think that people will catch our drift at some point, but creatives always have to assume that the concept will, at some point, need to defend itself, and we probably won't be there to help. Being able to deliver its concept clearly is what defines a strong pitch deck. So now that I've waxed poetic on how important it is, how do we achieve that clarity? The two most important aspects of a good pitch deck is presentation and brevity. A clean and concise presentation with good formatting can elevate your work, while poor presentation with paragraphs of text will distract people from the work you're trying to show them. I think especially because some people get really into the world building and they get really into the details of how all of this logic in the world works, that they get really excited to share that with people. But a pitch deck is really not the place to do that. This is why storytelling through character design is so important and so cool and so fun, because you get to do all of that. But in a pitch deck, it's really about making sure that the people who are reading it and the people who are getting this information get the bare essentials so that they can just get on board and greenlight your project. So there are obviously a lot of ways to build these pitch decks, but I want to show you my way that I've used in pretty much all of my client work when it came to having to pitch a certain project or a character. The pattern goes like this. I first have my title card, then an introduction, then my character archetype pages, and then an end card. Throughout the presentation itself, I like establishing a consistent visual throughline or a general UI for the whole pitch. This includes a consistent color palette and text styles with modifiable but simple page layouts. I try to keep my UI simple while still adding some creative flares to it, like low contrasting patterns, gradients, or small textures to help the whole pitch deck emulate the aesthetic of the character or project I'm pitching. Now let's talk about what information should be on each of the pages that I talked about before. First is the title card. This is not always necessary for a quick deck turnaround over chat or email, and this is something I'll discuss after this section, but it's generally nice to have if you're showing a whole team or putting it on your portfolio, because it gives you time to present the work you're doing. It doesn't have to be too fancy. You can kind of see in this format that I've provided you. I just have a project name and a space for the character design project subtitle, as well as a space for your name. a year, and possibly a brand logo. I like adding the company logo if it's a pitch for an established company or team, since it shows that the presentation belongs to that team and that IP. If you're doing a fan project though, make sure that you put fan art or some kind of disclaimer saying that this is not official work for this certain IP or company, just to save yourself any hassle in the future. Next up is the intro, so this is where you can set up the world or the story premise. I like doing this because it's like a preliminary exposition to get people to buy into the character concept. If you're given a premise by the client, then you can omit this or make this section an elevator pitch for your characters or their faction's archetype, like a teaser leading up to the big reveal. Again, keep your text minimal and concise. I try to describe everything in 1 to 3 sentences, as well as bold, important keywords, so that even people who hate reading can get the gist of the page. Next up is character. Here's the page people, and probably you, are most excited for, but remember, keep it concise. Go back to your ref board and pick the best images that describe your character pitch. These can include aesthetic, archetype, silhouette, physical features such as face claims, bodily features, etc., clothing style, and cultural source. You can have 1 page per character, or you can establish factions in this format and then show individual characters relevant to that faction. This page can also be set up to stand alone without the rest of the presentation for any kind of quick pitch use, but I'll go over that in more detail after this section. Finally, the end card. This page, like the title card, isn't totally necessary for quick deck turnarounds, but it is a nice way to cap off a presentation for a team or client because it wraps up the experience as opposed to abruptly stopping. Think of it like inviting a movie audience back into reality when the film ends through the credits, as opposed to the lights just turning on after the last scene. So that's kind of the layout I use when I'm approaching a new pitch deck for a project. Here is a list of some other optional content that you can also put in. Sections are primarily for client or team presentations, but I find having them in your work can give you time to transition the audience towards a new headspace. This is great for dividing up the presentation into groups of pages like multiple characters or world-building assets. If your character has a prop that's pretty vital to their design or archetype, it's a pretty good idea to make a page for that too. This shows that you're thinking of the character design as a whole and not just the person. Character design is a vehicle for all types of storytelling, and anything on the character counts as part of the design, even inanimate or animate objects. While not often included in a character pitch deck, occasionally you'll also be invited to pitch a visual style as well, likely to help define an art direction for the project. If this is your personal project and you're trying out some new styles or techniques, sometimes it can help to make a guide which details the design pillars for the result you're aiming for. I often use the pillars format since I like distilling the important bits in small digestible chunks of information, but definitely feel free to describe the section in any way that you wish. I often put this section before the character pages since it counts as a type of premise for the project. Finally, we have world-building elements. This could be anything that adds depth to your pitch, such as faction, iconography, proposed color palettes, etc. Just remember that this too needs to be primarily explained via photos or custom images that you make with short paragraphs of text. So that's a pitch deck. But as I promised, I want to quickly mention a modified version of this for any situation requiring a fast turnaround. Sometimes you just don't need all of that preamble with the title and the intro, and all someone or you really need is one solid reference page for your character. The character page formats that we've discussed could certainly work, but I'd like to show you a format that I created for my project, Wrath of Dogs. So this is one of the ways that I used to do ref boards, and this is a really solid way to do a ref board if it's just about selling one character in specific or one team in specific. I think this really worked for me, and I still really like these pages, but let me just explain kind of how I laid this out. I started off with a team name at the top of the page, and I tried to make kind of a placeholder logo that would really explain and set the mood for this whole team in general. I also tried to pick kind of a general color palette that would also emulate that same feel, and in this case it was kind of a pastel neon sort of aesthetic. And then right below that logo I put a elevator pitch text blurb. The bulk of the actual image itself is taken up by the images, and I don't know, I still kind of like how I separated the two. So on the left I have the fashion, and on the right I have the aesthetic. To kind of offset what I showed in the previous one, here's another version of it. Same layout, but totally different aesthetic. So it's got the white and it's got the gold because I was going for something very statuesque, very elegant, very regal, and very mature. So again, format is the same, but I try to make it just a little bit weird to fit with the rest of this team, which is very avant-garde, tight, a little creepy, a little goth. Their main inspiration was insects and spiders, so it kind of felt right to give them this very sort of violent color palette, if that makes any sense. So in this class, I've covered the basics for building a pitch deck, including formats I've personally used for client and personal work. For your mission, I want you to build either a full pitch deck or a quick character page, depending on if you're pretending to pitch to a company or a client, or if you're just working on a personal project. You're free to use the formats I've provided, but I encourage you to go out and look at how other people have created page layouts for their own presentations. In the next chapter, we are finally starting the character design portion of the class, so I'll see you there!